Hello everybody and welcome to the stream. I've got to warn you, tonight will be a little bit depressing. The topic is just depressing and the way I'm going to approach it is depressing, but there's nothing I can do about that. So that's what it's going to be. I'm just going to record the podcast tonight and if you don't want depression, go away. All I can say. It just occurred to me I might as well have the desk cam, right? I mean, I have the desk cam. Hello, Astral. How are you doing? Hope you're doing well. And a good thing will be that it's not going to be really depressing if you're not in Germany, because the German constitution doesn't appeal to you. Doesn't, appeal to you, maybe that either, but doesn't affect you, but maybe, my mood will get you down. So that's just a fair warning there. I thought was applicable, but I'm going to say that again on the show as well. Anyway, let's get the show on the road. It's late. As usual these days, just too much to do, too little time. Yes, I do not have tracks armed. Well, that won't work. Now I have tracks armed, and now it's actually recording things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're recording. That seems to work. That seems to work as well. Yeah, it looks good. Right. Shall I do this? I think I'll just, I like a Band-Aid. Let's rip it off. Let's go straight into the thing. An alcoholic drink might be advised. Jim, hello. How are you doing? Might actually be good. I'm having tea. I'm trying to cut down on the alcohol a little bit personally, but don't let myself stop you. I just I thought drinking every night maybe is not the most healthy thing. Maybe I want to get off that a little bit. It's gone bad enough through November because of NaNoWriMo, so I might as well mellow that out a little bit. Anyway, I'm going to start the show and we'll get right into it. A little bit of philosophy, and then some constitutional legalities, which I always thought were fun, but not this time. Okay, let's do this. Let's get the show on the road. You're listening to The Private Citizen, the podcast for critical thinkers. This is episode 98 for Wednesday, the 1st of December, 2021. The German Constitution and the virus. Hey everybody, how are you doing? My name is Fab. I'm your host, as usual, coming to you live from Düsseldorf in Germany. Today, whatever time it is for you, it is night for me, very late in the day, but I still have a lot of work ahead of me, part of which is this podcast, so let's get right into it. We're going to talk about the current, very, very current German Constitutional Court decision on the pandemic restrictions, which I think has to be talked about. We've talked about this topic ever since the show was started. It's a big impact on civil liberties. So I want to talk about it. I was originally planning to do this episode about the traffic light, the Ampel coalition, and update you on that, on the new German government. I'm planning to do that next episode. This is just something I had to that just hit me out of the blue, and I had to kind of slip it in before that, because it's just, I think, very, very important. So warning applies. Coronavirus topic ahead. I want to mention quickly, I did this in the last episode as well, the 100th episode's coming up, 1 year anniversary. Want to talk a little bit about okay, I'm gonna have a little bit of tea and calm down here. I want to talk a little bit about me and where I come from, to give you a little bit more of a background. And as part of that, if you have some questions, please ask them. I put a link in the show notes. If you go to privatecitizen.press. What's wrong with me today? privatecitizen.press. There's a link to the forum. There's a topic there, and you can chime in. You can ask me some questions. Maybe come up with some ideas for that show, that episode. That would be nice. And with that, let's get into before we get into the main topic, I want to have a little bit of a quick deviation at the beginning, which includes a little bit of a disclaimer. So let's get that out of the way first. And that disclaimer being that this episode might actually be a little bit depressing to you. I don't know. It's certainly when this decision came out and I read it and I did some research on it, I felt very depressed. I felt very bad today, this morning. I was getting very angry and then very sad about it. I went on a run, which helped massively. I ran 10 kilometers in the icy snow rain that we have right now, and that helped me a lot. And I'm a lot more mellow now. But I want to give you a fair warning that this might have that effect on you. It might not. I mean, this is about the German Constitution. If you, if you're in the US, really, what does that matter to you? You might find it interesting. If you're in another country, please, of course, I'm covering this because I live in Germany and it's close to my heart and it's very important to me. But I'm by no means not interested in other countries. I would love to see how things are happening where you are. Please let me know. I'll give you some feedback details at the end of the show. But you can also go to Private Citizen or Press. There's a contact link up at the top. The forum isn't in there yet. I know somebody already told me that. I need to fix that. I know that. I just have a lot to do right now and very little time, but I'll get to it. But there's a forum link in the feedback section of this episode, which we'll get to later. But you can also go just to the contact form and just send me an email or, encrypted communication, whatever you want, anonymous communication, whatever you want. So I want to know how things are going where you are. I've heard some stuff from the US that is really quite encouraging, that there's actually, some pushback against all this kind of stuff that's happening over here in Europe. And I'd be interested to know. Maybe you're probably, I was going to say China, but it's probably not better there. I don't know. Russia? Is it better in Russia? I have no idea. Please let me know. Maybe other European countries. I'm very interested in this. I would also be very happy to do an episode on, let's say you import Portugal and you want to tell me what the situation is there, or you want me to report on it. Just give me a few pointers and I'll get to it. I just have a lot of stuff to do and a lot of episodes on my to-do list. Of course, I'm focusing on what's, close to my heart first, but that doesn't mean I'm not interested in other stuff. To explain to you why I think this might be a little bit depressing. I had these feelings, and it's not the first time I had them since, this whole pandemic situation happened and all the laws, and I've reported on this a lot on the show, and I've ranted about this a lot of on the show a lot. But I feel like it's not the best approach for me personally, especially not for my health. I feel like I am getting angrier and angrier, and that's probably not a good thing generally in my life. And I actually read some stuff, and I saw some people talking about stuff on YouTube and also on Twitch actually, while I was just watching some random game streams. You pick up some wisdom here and there, and I've heard a lot of people recently reference the ancient Greek philosophy of Stoicism, and I actually combined with a bit of inspiration by my wife, who I feel like actually practices a lot of Stoicism, probably without consciously thinking about the ancient Greeks. I'm thinking it's more her nature, and she copes with situations like the one we're in right now generally a lot better than me. So I thought, maybe take some inspiration from that and practice a little bit of Stoicism. Now, what is Stoicism? Stoicism is basically, put a link in the show notes, of course, privatecitizen.press, to Wikipedia, where you can read about these kind of things without end. But Stoicism is basically an ancient Greek philosophy. I mean, it's been modernized, of course, as well. But like generally, it is a worldview that says that there are many, many, many things in your life that you cannot change. Your health, external factors, your government, things like that. That as a person you really can't change. And in a lot of things we think in modern times, and a lot of things you learn in university, there's a very different approach to that. There is always this idea that you can change things. That's what being progressive is all about. Demonstrating, going on the streets, stuff like that. But I feel like maybe it's because I'm getting older or something. I thought back in the day that a philosophy like Stoicism was bad, and we actually had to change things. And I'm not saying we don't have to change things or we can't, but I think what Stoicism says in a lot of ways is that for a lot of things you really can't as a person. There can be societal movements, and you can also be very lucky and start one. Or you can be part of one, but generally you can change a lot less things than often you would like to think. And what Stoicism says is the virtue of a man or a woman or a person that identifies as another gender, whatever. If I'm gonna say this is shorthand because I'm a man, I have a penis, so I'm gonna say a man. That's also how the ancient Greeks, of course, spoke. The virtue of a man is determined by how, I'm going to say they now, just a piece, to be a little bit progressive, how they approach these factors that they can change, i.e. being how, your ethics and your morals are not determined by what you say you do, but what you do. Right? If you assume that there are many factors in the world that you can change, then your virtue is determined by how you react to those, and not so much how you talk about them, but what you actually do. And a lot of Stoicism is, that's where if you have heard of being Stoic in in common speech, it usually means being in the face of danger or of adversary, being calm and collected, and not bemoaning things that you can't change, stuff like that. And that's generally something I admire, and I myself want to be. I want to be more like that. I'm not saying I'm going to be completely stoic, because I can't. I will still rant about things and get angry about things. But if I can, I want to do that less, especially about things like, the German Constitution, which we're going to talk in a little bit, and then the Constitutional Court saying something about that, because that is a very good example of a thing I can't change. The German government did something. Hundreds of people said, we don't think this should be legal under our constitution. They went the only way they can go in our political system, and they appealed to the Constitutional Court. And now the Constitutional Court, which is the highest court in the land, the decision it makes a final, a very final, that can never be overturned. They will never be looked at again. So, that this is a final decision. The final decision is, in this case, no, this was completely legal. Now, that is a factor you cannot change. Not by voting, you can never change this. This is unchangeable. A problem like this will never be before the Constitutional Court again, and there will never be another decision, as long as, the Federal Republic of Germany in the structures that we know of today exists. So this is something you can very much only approach in two ways: with Stoicism or with impotent rage. And when I was younger, I would have approached this with impotent rage. Now I'm getting older and I'm getting wiser, and my hair's getting a lot grayer, and I'm trying to approach this with Stoicism. Now, generally, you'd think, why, that's a very, that's a relatively positive attitude generally. And, Stoics in ancient Greece time were that was a positive thing. There might be war, but you're the one who deals with it calmly and says, there's some things I cannot change, but I can change my behavior towards other things, and I will do that, and will do that with virtue. So that's a positive thing. Now, I do think that generally, however, this will be considered, especially if you're listening to a podcast with me talking about this kind of thing, it's somewhat of it's a little bit of a defeatist attitude, right? Because this will just accept that some things can't be changed. And then I can't have rousing speeches about it, right? And I won't call you to activism or something. Or to voting, or whatever. So I think that's a little bit depressing. And when I was thinking about this and how to approach these kind of things, and about being more stoic in my own life, this was kind of a thing where I was sad, because we draw a lot of energy and a lot of hope from the feeling that things might change. And I think, I personally think, being stoic in certain situations and embracing stoicism is it's a very mature and grown-up thing to do, specifically because you're taking away from yourself this kind of hope, which often is like a little bit of a self-delusion, right? You're in a shitty situation and you're saying like things will get better. And, I feel generally, it's like saying, just a very quick example. It's like saying, but all our lives are getting better, right? All the time. And I don't think they do. Like, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I don't think they do. If I think back at when I was growing up and my parents, I'm relatively privileged. My parents weren't poor. They weren't rich, but they weren't poor. But they were a normal household in Germany, I would say. They weren't like even upper middle class. They're just a normal middle class household, right? And two parents, a kid, and in some respects, actually, our life was a lot different, and I wouldn't say as well off, maybe monetarily, but my parents both worked, right? So that I didn't see them a lot when I was a kid. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, so it's not like everything was perfect. But generally in our lives, my parents had 2 cars. They both needed cars because had to go to work. My mother had like a 45-kilometer commute for a long time. But they both had cars, and they just bought a new car like every they replaced each car they replaced every 4 to 5 years. So every 2 to 3 years, they'd be they'd replace this car, and then the other, they were kind of they wouldn't replace them at the same time, right? So they were kind of spaced out. So every 2 or 3 years, my dad or my mom got a new car. And, and I see how much they worked and how much money they earned and stuff like that. And, the pension and that they have now. And I look at my own life, and, in the last 10 years, I bought a car. my household, me and my wife, we bought a car and a motorcycle. And the motorcycle was relatively cheap, cost about 8,000 euros, and the car cost about 10 because it's a used car. Now that is way less than my parents would spend on one of their cars every 2 to 3 years. Way less. They're also like, I mean, okay, me and my wife probably not a good example because we don't really have jobs. We have callings, we always say, but like we work a lot. Like I used to think my parents were workaholics because I didn't see my dad a lot, but and he had a stressful job, and he was somewhat of a workaholic because he was very passionate for his job, but essentially he worked an 8 to 5 job, maybe 8 to 6, right? And my mother worked a normal 8 to 5 job. I did some stuff on the weekends, but generally good, paid well for that as well, I think. But generally 8 to 5 job, and I work a lot more, and my wife works a lot more, and we don't make as much money as my parents did. So I mean, this is a very personal. We also have different jobs, right? They're not comparable. My dad ran a company for a while, and stuff like that. But my mother was an employee at a government, no, not a government. It was like the public works, electricity company. But it's not really comparable. But still, I think I see that through. Yeah, like it's a very personal thing, but you can see it throughout. If you open your eyes and you compare like the lives. Like I'm just gonna say my generation, or like your generation is living. I don't know what generation you're in, so it's hard to say. But compared to the generation of your parents, for example, right? How many cars people have, how much they work, how much money they're getting for their work. I mean, I see that throughout pretty much my friends and the people I know. They're generally working for less. They're working more for less. I mean, there are exceptions, of course. But I don't think generally we're better off, not compared to our parents. I mean, if I look at at the healthcare system, at the pension system, what I'll get out if I ever get a pension, right? Compared to what my parents got. Let's not talk about the generation before them. Like it's getting it's not getting better. I don't think people say that a lot, but I don't think it's necessarily true. I think I used to believe that when I was younger as well. I mean, it's another example maybe, and then I'm going to move on. Is technology. Where people say, "Oh, we used to have the internet, and we didn't have that, and now we have the internet, and we have access to all this knowledge," right? Which comes with a lot of problems that we also talked about on the show, like how hard it is to actually research things, that people actually won't research things even though they can. People could actually people just in some respects that things haven't changed. People just watch the news. And they believe what's on the news, right? Or they don't watch it. They read it now on the internet, whatever. But they have 20, let's say 30 years ago when I was growing up, you saw something on the news. You didn't have the ability to check that. Today you have. I'm guessing if you're listening to the show, you know this because that's what this show is about. Basically, a journalist telling you, hey, you could do this job. You don't have to do the job, but say on a certain topic that really interests you, you could actually do the same job a journalist does and look this up. You can do this. You just need a computer and an internet connection, and you can do anything that somebody in the newsroom, at the BBC does. Literally, they don't have any special. I mean, they have special access to sometimes politicians and companies, but the only thing they get there is more PR. The access to facts. You have the same access to statistics and data than all of these people have. things are not getting better because people don't use that, right? They're not going. I'm going to check up on these guys, which is, I'm not saying it's understandable because of the aforementioned. They have to work more for less, right? And they have more stress at their jobs. So I don't know what, but we have all this technology. We have very, very powerful computers in our pockets. What do we use them for? Instagram. It's not necessarily getting better. Maybe I'm just depressed today, but I'm really not the guy to be depressed. I feel like this is more. I'm not really. Also, I'm very calm about this. Like, I'm not really sad about this. It's just something that occurred to me thinking about all these things. Anyway, so I do not think that things are generally getting better, and I think it's okay to analyze that and to approach it like this. I hope it'll be helpful to you. I hope if I'm a little bit more stoic also on this podcast, that it provides the same service to you as if I rant about something, which is probably more entertaining. And because I'm me, that will still happen. But we'll see. Anyway, as always, feedback, please. The rule applies. Look this all up for yourself. Please provide feedback. You know how. Anyway, now that I'm a bit more stoic, let's get into the top. Let's get into a topic to be stoic about, which is, constitutional court matters. Well, I messed up hitting that bumper, didn't I? Well, I'm not going to change that. I'm very stoic about this. So what has happened? So the Bundesverfassungsgericht, the Constitutional Court of Germany, has decided about a lot of complaints that people had about the so-called Bundesnotbremse, which roughly translate to the federal handbrake or the federal emergency brake. Now, it's a law. They call it that because viertes Gesetz zum Schutz der Bevölkerung bei einer epidemischen Lage von nationaler Tragweite, or the fourth law to protect the public from an epidemic situation of national importance, is too long. So they call it Bundesnotbremse. This is like the fourth of these laws. We talked about the third one, which was in 2020, in November 2020, I think. I didn't talk about the fourth one in detail because at the time I didn't want to depress people too much with talking too much about the pandemic. But basically, what was at question here were, lockdowns. Three aspects of which the third one I don't care about, so I'm not going to talk about it much. But so there were, contact restrictions in public spaces. I mean, they would have loved to do that, in private spaces, but they really can't. And then, of course, the curfew, which I talked about. When they had the curfew, depending on where you were in Germany and what the magic incident rate was, there was a curfew. We had one in Düsseldorf for a month or two, which was you couldn't go out after 10 at night, 5 in the morning. You could go out till, I think, midnight for running and walking your dog and stuff like that. But, anyway, that stuff. The third factor was closing schools, which, I don't have kids. I don't plan to have kids. I'm not a teacher. So it's relatively far from what I'm interested in my life, but just for completeness sake, So people said doing all of this is clearly not is not compatible with the German Constitution, the Grundgesetz, the GG, as we like to call it, GG. And I would have said yes. My understanding, I'm very much a layperson, I'm no lawyer. I did about 3 semesters of constitutional law in history in university, and then I did like a semester maybe in politics. but also these kind of things are this. The Constitution is it's not very the German Constitution, but I think from what I understand, for let's say the U.S. Constitution is very much the same. It's a relatively broadly worded law that is all about how you interpret it. So in the German one, the Constitution is like a very small book, and then if you get the commentated version, it's like 5 times as big or 10 times as big, because the commentary is the important part. That is how like constitutional lawyers interpret and how the Constitutional Court has interpreted certain things in the past, and that makes up kind of a part of the law. It's like a body of understanding of the law, right? That's very important. And decisions like this one that we had like yesterday or whatever, they go in there. But in my understanding, I would have said, generally, I think my understanding would have been that at least the curfew was unconstitutional. I believe that the freedom of the individual citizen is actually very strongly worded in there, and that, of course, with any law, the Constitution isn't different. You always have to balance. There's the right to not be harmed in there, and then there's the right for personal freedom, and then you have to see if my right to freedom interferes with somebody else's right not to be harmed, then usually the other person's right not to be harmed is more important. That's usually more important than freedom. I understand that, but usually you have to have a very clear harm, right? And if the virus at questions, I've said this before, I believe on the show, would be Ebola, where get it, it's, if you're lucky, 50-50 that you die. If you're older than 60, the chance to die is almost 100%. That's a very clear danger. Whereas, SARS-CoV-2 infection, even like, I thought we didn't understand the process of infection back then when this was discussed, in April. I mean, even now, we didn't understand that clearly enough for that to be a clear danger. Now, the Constitutional Court, interestingly, has gotten, on the other hand, they're basically saying the situation was so unclear that it was reasonable for the government to go, this might be a really real danger, and so now we're doing this. And this is an argument that I wholly do not follow. I understand where it's coming from, but I think it's very dangerous. And I think as a constitutional judge, that is just almost, I don't know. It's to me it would be unthinkable. I think you're safeguarding people's civil liberties, and if you just go, the government didn't know, so they had to lock people into their houses, it's basically that's I'm overemphasizing here, but so I would have not thought that this would happen, but it has. They've declared this all for constitutional. They basically said that these measures, so the limiting of individual freedoms of every citizen of the state is justified because the state needs to protect the citizens, as in their whole, basically, from danger. And the danger they specifically talk about is not so much infection, but a collapse of the medical system. That's this. I talked about this on the show very early on. I had the discussion with Alex. What was it called? God, I can't even remember. It's not even 2 years ago, and I can't fucking remember what the wave, something with the wave. I'm looking at the show note now. Probably flatten the curve. That was it. I've already forgotten all that. Flatten the curve. Now, I find this very interesting because, I mean, in itself, I can follow that. In itself, I follow that. I think that is reasonable. But what the Constitutional Court doesn't mention and completely ignores here is that the government, I mean, this is if you boil it down, it's a case of the government doing something and citizens saying, we don't think that you should be able to do that under the Constitution. Now, what they completely ignore, which I don't think is good, not that we can change that, Stoicism, but what they ignore is that the government, in my opinion, and obviously I'm not a lawyer or anything, but I think the government was almost criminally negligent. And if your deciding factor is the medical system, ICU beds basically, then I think the German government was. I'm going to make the case where I think it's almost criminally negligent, but they didn't do anything. We're talking this law was passed in April. At that time, they've had 3 months. I'm not saying they shouldn't have passed this law. I'm not even saying that. I'm saying what they didn't do is also prepare the medical system. To this day, they've done nothing to prepare the medical system. We have the same situation right now that we had last April, where all of the press is reporting on ICU beds, how they're not enough, how it's all dangerous, and we have to have lockdowns or whatever measures to protect the medical system. But the government has done nothing to improve the situation. In fact, I think there are criminal. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but to me, that it comes very close. If this was a company or something, I would even say this is almost criminal because the people in charge, they've actually reduced ICU beds in Germany. I know a lot of doctors in several hospitals all over Germany, and not one of these hospitals. We're talking 4, 5 hospitals. Big hospitals. Not one of them has more ICU beds than it had a year and a half ago. I think almost all of them have less. I think one has more, technically, but that's because they moved some stuff together. I mean, the government has been absolutely negligent in doing anything here, right? They've not come up. I mean, the problem is not the beds or the machines. The problem is you need nurses. You need specially trained nurses, and they haven't come up with any plan to get more of them. I mean, I know nothing about the medical system. I know a few doctors, that's everything. But I would have a few ideas. You could pay them better. The problem why you don't have ICU nurses or even not enough nurses in Germany is because they're paid shit. They have shit pay. They have shit working hours. Talking about what I talked about earlier. So you don't want to do that job. That's a very hard job. Why not paying better? Significantly better. Maybe twice as good. Another problem is if you want to train somebody like this who could save somebody's life, on an ICU when they're dying of COVID, it takes 3 years to train such a person. Now, I don't understand why there isn't why they haven't created a year ago, or at least in April. They could have done all of this in April. I mean, we wouldn't be there yet, but at least we'd be on the way. What I think is the criminal negligence is that we're not even on the way. Nobody has even started to do anything like this. Right, you could have had a special course where you go, okay, we're not training people to be general ICU nurses. I don't know how this works, but I imagine this is possible. We will create a thing which is like a fast track, which we'll call like COVID-19 nurse or whatever. And then maybe that this just takes a year or a year and a half instead of 3. Or maybe 2. But, anything. They haven't done anything. Our current health minister is still the guy who in February of 2020 said we need to be brave and cut the hospital beds, right? And they haven't done anything in April of 2021. We're talking this law from April of 2021. I would even assume that by that time they could have done something. It'd been a year. They had a year. But even then, they could have just started at that point, and we'd now be maybe moving in the right direction. But they have done nothing. And what I find extremely shocking is that the Constitutional Court says that the government is in their right to take liberties away from a citizen to protect them, but it does not take into account, and as a measure of protection, they take a very specific thing, the medical system, life-saving ICU beds, whatever, and they don't look at what the government has done there. I would have thought, I would have said, if I was the Constitutional Court, if I was sat on the Constitutional Court, I would have said, okay, if the government had done everything it could to improve the situations in the hospitals, and we still have a dangerous situation, then maybe we need to take civil liberties away from people or encroach on them, because there's really no other way to help. But the logical way to help, the way to help that I've identified in when was this episode? I'm pretty sure I would have to go back and listen to this episode, but I'm pretty sure when I discussed with Alex, when was this? So we're talking Flatten the Curve, this is episode 10. We're talking 29th of March, 2020. I'm pretty sure back then I've said, well, yeah, flatten the curve is a good idea, but I think we need to we need to power up the hospital system. And since then, I've even said stuff like, I'm a very conservative person. I'm generally not a believer in making things state-owned. But I believe with hospitals, they should be state-owned. I mean, if the government's whole goal now is to protect its citizens from a disease, it should take over hospitals. There's no reason hospitals need to make money. That's not their job. The job of a hospital is to save people's lives and to make them better. It's not a job. It's not something you invest in and you make money. It's something the government just puts money in. It's not an investment. It's something. If the government's job is to protect people's lives, then they need to take care of this shit and do whatever it takes to prepare this hospital system. And this is what is so absolutely disheartening to me about this decision. It's not so much the measures, and it's not so much saying, well, it is saying that this was a bad emergency. I'm going to get into that as well, but but it's also not seeing that factor that the government completely failed its job here. The government did not understand the situation from the beginning. It handled it completely wrong. And it's now got a rain check from the Constitutional Court to do this again, instead of a slap on the wrist. And I personally think that, if you go to the website of the Constitutional Court of Germany, it's very proud that it's 70 years old. And I personally think that in these 70 years, this was the biggest challenge. This was the biggest proving ground the Constitutional Court ever had. In these 70 years, we haven't had anything like this. I mean, we had terrorism in the 70s, but even there, the state wasn't there was no curfews. I mean, there was a lot of traffic stops that you could say that they were completely bullshit, and a lot of papers, please kind of business. But there was nothing like this. There were no curfews, no shutting people's lives down. That's most disheartening to me. And I also think that like one of the problems is that they're basically saying, this is okay because this was a the way they term this was an extreme emergency situation. And the issue I have with that, I mean, it's not a question that this is a extremely bad situation. But I still think, and I've talked about this a lot, that like the public perception of what is going on is off with reality, and thus I think the perception of the judges on this court, because they're normal people as well, they're just reading the press, and I mean the press has been as I've said from the beginning, has been horrible in reporting this from the very beginning, and it's when they're talking about the waves, it's just not so much of virus waves. It's more about like waves of the press, like stirring everybody up into a panic with I went for this research today. I went to look at the website of the Tagesschau, which is, the German, the biggest primetime news television show. And then, Spiegel and some others. But you look at those two websites, and they're full of fear. They're, back on Linux Outlaws days, we would call this fear, uncertainty, and doubt. FUD. The shit Microsoft pulled to get people to be afraid of Linux. Propaganda. But, FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. They're doing exactly that right now about this Omicron variant, where they're making people afraid. Right? And then I went, for the first time in 5 months or whatever, I was like, okay, what's the WHO say about this? Go to the WHO website, they say, okay, we currently don't know that it's more contagious. We don't know that that it causes more bad health, bad illnesses or death. In fact, that looks the other way around. It looks like it's milder. It does look a little bit like it's more contagious, but we can't really prove that. It does look a little bit like it's milder. And we think the vaccines are not affected and they will work. And if you read that, where's that's the science, as they like to say, right? That's the science. So the science would not make you afraid. Unless, you're like, it could be. And that's basically what the press is going on about. Wow, we don't know. So it means it could be. And then at the end, they're like, but really, we don't really know as much about this. We really don't know. But it could be more dangerous. So we need to force vaccinate everybody. This is and it's just like that. It's like people not understanding that, a case, i.e. somebody being positive, has nothing to do with them becoming sick. And that somebody becoming sick is not the same as getting COVID and ending up in an ICU bed. And I very much believe that the judges on the Constitutional Court don't understand this either. I mean, they're not biologists, probably. I'm pretty sure they're all lawyers. They just read the newspapers as well. And the newspapers have just been wrong about this for a year and a half, completely. And that's generally the problem. I mean, I think that's what's going on. So that's very disheartening. Now, tomorrow, we had the minister presidents of the German federal states, i.e. the heads of the German federal states, get together. They came together yesterday or today, but tomorrow they already decided pretty much what they're going to do. It is expected that tomorrow they're going to decide on the following things. Also, clearly empowered by this federal constitutional court decision. They're going to decide that vaccinations are, you'd have to refresh them every 6 months, which I don't understand how, right? I don't. If you have a good study, if you have a link to the just unnavigatable, unchartable depths that is PubMed right now, and you can point me to a good study that has hard data on the vaccines actually not being effective past 6 months, I would love to. Please contact me. I'm going to talk about this on the show. I want to know about this. As far as my understanding, where the 6 months comes from is from the, when your titer goes away, when the antibodies go away in your blood. Now, from basic immunology, can't talk, need more tea, I think. Does tea help with it? Maybe the pause in drinking just helps, reset your brain. And you can think about the word you want to pronounce. From basic immunology that I've learned in high school, there is more to the immune response. And there's certainly many ways that you are still immune against the disease, whether you got it naturally or you got vaccinated after the antibodies in your blood go away. Because your body remembers those antibodies and can make new ones. Or I think they remember do they remember the antigenes? They have cells that remember this shit, and then they can make new ones, which isn't as fast as a response as if you have the antibodies in your blood naturally, but it still very much works. But I don't know. Maybe we've learned more about immunology. I just whenever they write about something like this in the Spiegel, it's not like they're going, here, this is how it works, and this is why we now know this. No, they just talk around it, which makes me, that's a journalist way of, I really have no clue what I'm doing here. I don't know any about this. I'm just gonna repeat what the experts say. So I would like to know. I don't think that, but okay, I will have to get a booster. If I want to do anything by February, so be it. Okay. A thing that they also decided there's going to be lockdowns and contact restrictions for unvaccinated people. What I think about that, I've told you in previous episodes when I talked about how the cult of the vaccine and victim blaming and all that kind of thing. There will be widespread adoption of 2G, i.e. vaccinated or recovered, almost everywhere in public. If I'm vaccinated, so I don't really care. I find it incredibly jarring as a German. Apparently, I'm the only German, which I find weird. But every time I go anywhere, I specifically have this yellow booklet. I don't use an app because I don't want to make it easy for me. I want to have to pull out this booklet. And I think that's why, because I'm the only one with this booklet, right? So whenever I go to a restaurant anywhere, I have to I'll pull out this booklet. And it's very much like, your papers, please. It's very much like this, the Hogan's Heroes. Yeah, we have a Sperre here, and you have to check your papers, and you have to pull your papers out. Yeah, I find it incredibly jarring, but apparently that's just me. And then now comes the thing that, they want to have a vaccination requirement for people working in medical professions or old folks' homes and stuff like that, which I think, that wouldn't be unconstitutional because you're not forced to work in that kind of job. And we've done this before with measles now, for example, although that is also from last year, so... That's also new. It's also the new Infektionsschutzgesetz. They brought that in, and they started with measles. But yes, okay. I don't understand this from a... This is another thing I don't understand from a practical purpose, because, I know lots of people work in hospitals, and they're all vaccinated. They work in hospitals. Nobody fucking works in a hospital. And also... we talked about this before, and it's becoming clearer and clearer that being vaccinated does not help you stop the transmission. Any data that's coming in that I'm seeing tells you the exact opposite. And even the experts, the experts in air quotes, the ones that are on the news, which are generally always on the opposite opinion spectrum about these things than me, they're all saying that as well, because it's obvious. I mean, you just look at Portugal. They have a vaccination rate of 92% and had so for quite a while now. And, you know, their curve is going up like everybody else's. I mean, what the vaccination does is you will get sick, but you won't get COVID, right? You get the sniffles. You won't get COVID, and you don't end up in ICU. So the vaccine clearly helps protecting you, the vaccinated person. This just doesn't help protect anybody else, which I've said from the beginning. Vaccines were never meant to do that. Nobody ever, until like 2019, or even probably 2020, until 2020, nobody ever said that vaccines do this. No health expert, no epidemiologist. That was like a new idea. And everybody just, I don't know, pretended that was a thing that always existed. But it was a new idea. So it becomes very clear that this is the case now. But so I don't understand that. And now the thing I find incredibly jarring, which apparently they want to try to decide, is that they now want to force every German citizen to be vaccinated. Which, you know, again, people think, I have no horse in this race. You know, I have 2 shots already. I've got the DNA one, I've got the RNA one, and if they have another one, I get that for the booster, and then I have everything. Then I'm like triple genomic manipulated organism, whatever. You know, I don't give a fuck. I have no horse in this race. But I would have said, from what I understand, what the German constitution, not only how it's written, but also what it was meant to do. I mean, and I cannot imagine that the people who wrote the Constitution back in the day didn't have the Nazis in mind, and didn't have Mengele and the KZ doctors in mind, and the experiments they did on people they thought, you know, we talked about the stupid idea of having races, you know, the people they thought they were subhuman, you know, the tests they did on them when they wrote the Constitution. And the Constitution basically says the state can't force bodily harm onto you, which a needle in your arm counts as bodily harm under German law. Clearly. If you want to get tattooed, you have to sign a statement that says you allow this. Otherwise, the tattooist would go to jail. It's a crime. It's schwere Körperverletzung. It's like aggravated assault. So if you inject somebody with something, even if it's only water, if you needle them, in German, it's aggravated assault. And also, I think unconstitutional. I would have said so, and I still say so. I would have said the Constitutional Court would say so. But that was before this other decision. I think now all bets are off. I think they're actually going to go through with it. Because at the end of the day, something I've actually thought about today while I was running. I had about an hour and a half in ice cold rain in the dark, wearing an 8 kilogram vest, bulletproof. Well, it ain't bulletproof, it's just steel. So probably not maybe gonna stop at 22. But like a tactical vest with my light attached to it. So I'm running in the dark, and it's incredibly, you get in the zone. It's incredibly good for thinking, right? You try to forget the pain, and you start to think about things like this. And what I was thinking about when I was running there is, you know, first of all, I don't understand why they're doing this. Because especially now, it's become very clear that if you do not vaccinate yourself, the only person you're endangering is yourself. So, you know, it's everybody, all the experts say, look, it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Everybody in the ICU beds is unvaccinated. Only unvaccinated people are in ICU beds. Only those people die. generally. Okay, there are exceptions that prove the rule, but so if that's true, that is the science, in air quotes, how can the state say we need to vaccinate you to, the only constitutional argument would be if the danger is very high to the other, if you're endangering the other people, we can force you to be vaccinated to protect those other people. There is no constitutional argument for the state saying we kind of need to protect you from yourself. Because they can't do that in any other situation. If you come to a hospital and you're bleeding, but you're clear of mind, right? But you're just blood coming out of you, and they're like, "Fab, no problem. We're gonna give you some morphine, and then we're gonna stitch you up. You're gonna live." Everybody who's had like a accident like this lives. And I say, no, I don't want that. I don't want you to put me on any machines. I don't want any morphine, and I don't want you to take a needle to my skin and sew me closed. Then they can't. If I'm clear of mind, they're gonna have to let me die. Otherwise, it'd actually be a crime if you do anything to somebody, if you do operations to somebody, there has to be very clearly legally defined stuff that the patient has to sign, or somebody, if they're not, within their faculties. Although it's very hard. You actually need to, most of the time, you need to actually specify somebody who can decide that for you. I mean, there are situations where the doctor can just, there's nobody there, you're unconscious, they're just going to decide. But if you're conscious and you say, I don't want this operation, they can't do anything. Right? So there is clearly no legal basis for them to do this to protect yourself. Because you can just, it's illegal for a doctor to, kill you if you want to, but you won't die, assisted death, like Pratchett was fighting for. They can't do that. But if they go Fab, you've got cancer, but it's very easily treatable. It hasn't metastasized, and it's not only in your left little toe. And we'll cut that off. You don't need that toe for nothing. You can run, you can do anything. You just have a toe less. That's no problem. There's many people who are born without that toe. Doesn't matter. And you'll be okay. We can almost guarantee the cancer won't come back. And I go, nah, don't want that. I want to keep my toe. And then I die a horrible death. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing they can do. There's nothing I can do. That is totally within my right as a citizen to decide that. So if I want to fucking die of COVID because I don't want to get a syringe in my arm, I don't understand how that's different. Now, the argument is, of course, that they're protecting other people, that they need to do that to protect other people. But as far as I can tell, the evidence isn't there. There's no evidence there. And also, even if the evidence was there, I would say this law is there so that the state can't do that. There's reasons why these laws exist. And sometimes that has downsides. Now, the other thing that occurred to me when I was running was, it doesn't matter what the law says. It really doesn't. You can have the best laws. Basically, laws by itself don't do anything. Laws are just words on paper, right? A law is interpreted by people. And it's interpreted by the Constitutional Court or other courts, by lawyers, but also by society. And because certain things, especially the Constitution, are worded very strongly, not very strongly, but they're worded strongly, but they're worded very broadly, right? I think the article that concerns this bodily harm things says nobody shall be harmed against their will, which is generally taken to mean, you can't be injected with anything if you don't want to. But society could go and say, well, that's no harm. Getting a vaccine is no harm. And it doesn't matter what the people who wrote this law intended. And I'm pretty sure they intended that nobody in Germany ever should have a medical procedure done against them, to them against their will, no matter what it is. And no matter who many other people can be saved. Because, I hate to bring this up, but this is the history of Germany. That's what the Nazis did. They said, we're doing these tests, or they said we're killing these people who are who have a certain disease, who are handicapped or whatever. We're killing them to clean the gene pool or whatever, and that is bullshit. But of course it's bullshit. But back then that was the argument, and it was also reported like that, in the press, and I think lots of people believe that. And that's why you have laws like that, because it might actually at the time look like the right thing to do, right? These laws are there, and it's in Germany's case specifically, our constitution and our whole legal system, everything, the government, the checks and balances, they are built so that something like the Third Reich coming, the Nazis coming to power in the Weimar Republic cannot happen again. And you don't even have to study history. You learn this in school. If you pay a little bit of attention, you understand that this is not a case where the people saw it coming. Back then, the majority of the people, or at least the zeitgeist, right, the society as a whole, through the press and everywhere else, to manipulation, but they generally thought this was a good idea. Getting the Nazis in power was a good idea. They were elected because people thought it was a good idea. When they realized that what they had just done and what happened, it was too late. And that is the problem. When you're sitting there and you're reflecting on what is happening in society right now, and laws and legal decisions and around this kind of thing, around your state, you have to guard against things that seem like actually a good idea at the time. Those are the dangerous ones, right? The dangerous thing today is not the neo-Nazis that have the swastikas, because we know them. We know those symbols. We know what they want. We know the way they want to come to power because we've seen it before. Those guys will not get to power. We have people guarding against that. Everybody, basically, because we have school and we teach people how those people came to power. The danger will come from a part of society that to us in our contemporary conscience looks like it's a good idea, right? I don't know what it will be. Probably, I don't know, climate change or whatever. It will be something where you think what these guys want. They're gonna be people that say, to protect the world, we need more power. And you could think, that could be antivirus. That could people. Antivirus sounds like Kaspersky. That could be people that promise you that they will actually keep you safe from the virus, or from climate change. That they will do the necessary thing to save the planet. Those are the people you have to guard against because they will look good. The very reason why people like the Nazis come to power, if it's not a revolution, it's if something like if a totalitarian is something, it's different if it's the Russian Revolution, right? And they're just fucking burning down the country, or like the French Revolution, then you can't do anything. But if it's a revolution like, when the Nazis came to power, when they're basically voted because people think what they are doing is a good idea at the time, that is the thing you gotta guard against. And what just occurred to me when I was running is just like, you have the laws, but the laws don't cover anything. The people are what's important. The people interpreting these laws society as a whole. And I can sit there and I can tell you that what might seem like a good idea here, which I'm skeptical about because I'm just not sure this weighing the danger of the virus, no matter how many people die. I mean, the problem is that we can't see the danger good enough because people don't understand the nature of disease. And, I've talked about this. They don't compare this. We've never checked for how many people die of the flu. We are not worried about how many people die of a heart attack, right? So we're just concentrating on this one disease and we're taking the numbers there, and that's why it looks very bad. So we don't think there's a comparative understanding how bad this is to everything else. And I just have the feeling that it's not so bad that you should weigh against civil rights in this, this much. But then also, if we don't talk about that at all, no matter how bad it is, like even if I agree it's that bad, what the Constitutional Court has done here today is basically say, if the German government says that there's a really bad emergency situation, then they can lock you in your home and do other things. And the problem is it's not even the problem, it's just the reality is that whether something is people like to make it sound like this deliberation, if this is an emergency situation, is a scientific thing, but it's not. It's not with SARS-CoV-2. We're deciding this based on tests that are not done in a scientific manner. They're just done. There's no scientific method to it. There's no negative controls. There's after the fact ad hoc statistical scientific analysis, but it's not a scientific experiment. So that's not on a scientific basis. We're deciding this based on people in the hospital and our ICU beds, which people make it sound like that's an ultimate number. That's like Germany has this many ICU beds, right? It has right now. But if the government could change that, that's the thing I'm saying. Like, why haven't they done that the last? We could have. I mean, if you went like it's the. So I think it's not a. It's not unrealistic to say if we as a nation of 83 million people decide that this is our goal, right? We could have just doubled ICU bed capacity. I mean, like, I would be rather for forcing people to become nurses. It'd be hard. Like, who do you decide? It's but like more that than forcing people to vaccinate, which doesn't help with the general situation. Somewhat, and to be really cold-hearted about this, because if it's true that only the unvaccinated people pretty much are the ones dying, you could say, and I, discussed this with my wife, and she said that's really cold-hearted, but let's be utilitarian here for a moment. The good of the many outweigh the good of the few or the one. Let's be fucking Spock and let's see how dark, being a Vulcan really is. If that's the problem, why don't let people leave the choice, and then just, if you get too many unvaccinated people in the ICU, then let them die. If somebody comes in who's vaccinated, who needs to go in the ICU or had a motorcycle accident or whatever, then put them in the ICU and kick a COVID guy out on the street and let him die. Because, that's the rhetoric you have in the German press right now, where you basically, the air's getting thin. The air's getting thin for the unvaccinated. And everybody's like, almost like giddy that, now we're going to force them to vaccinate because they're bad people, because they're dumb shits, because they're not vaccinated. Okay, then, then triage them, right? If that's the problem, tell everybody, look, if you're going to end up in the ICU and they don't have enough beds, your machines were shut off first. Here's your free vaccine if you want. To me, that would be a more humane thing to do, because you give the person a choice. If you force them to be vaccinated, you do not give them a choice. And the problem there, of course, is not to vaccinate. I don't care about people. Like, the point is not forcing somebody to get vaccinated. The point is giving the state the right to have a medical procedure done on you against your will. That's the precedent. What's going to be next? Right? At some point, people will figure out how unconducive to your health it is if you're overweight. And they will start to figure out the correlation between being fat and dying of a heart attack or some other cardiovascular disease. And then you get like, should we force people to have exercise? Shouldn't they not get health care because they're overweight? No, they're all body positive. That's like if you want to weigh 200 kilos, that's being body positive. But if you refuse to get vaccinated, you're basically a subhuman fucking moron. Yeah, Astro C says the government own you for the greater good. I read, I don't know who it was. It was just a quote. It doesn't matter who said it, but it was like somebody saying, I didn't say this earlier, but basically, why is the government taking my civil liberties away instead of, shoring up ICU bed capacity? It's very easy because it's easier for them to do. It's cheaper, it's easier. It's easier to take people's civil liberties away, which, you can just pass the law. The worst thing that will happen is the Constitutional Court goes and collects it a few months later. No harm done. And if you're lucky, like here, they won't even do that. And you're scot-free. If you actually have to do work to get people trained, to pay them more. You'd have to get the money from somewhere. That's things you can fuck up if you can't organize. That's hard for them to do. A lot of politicians are overweight, so I guess we are safe in that respect, says Terrestrial. Yeah, the problem is they don't, it doesn't kill you quick enough. It's not like you're overweight and then you're dead. And then they get to the fucking ICU and they get a triple bypass, right? If we went and said, it's your own damn fault, you didn't exercise, you're not getting the bypass. We're just letting you die. No, I don't want to see this is dumb because this makes me sound like I got anything against people overweight, which I really don't, because I am pro personal choice, right? That's why I say I don't want to force people to be vaccinated. I don't want to, I think people should live their lives however they want, especially if they don't endanger anybody else. And we have the science TM now that they're not endangering anybody when they're not vaccinated. Only person they're endangering is themselves. Like if they're drinking, like me, or they're smoking. Or they're drinking and smoking, and they're not exercising, they're endangering themselves very much. If they ride a motorcycle, if they want to climb Mount fucking Everest, let them climb Mount fucking Everest. People do skydiving. There's a German politician who died doing skydiving because his fucking parachute didn't open and he just splattered. Right? He was a liberal as well. He was very... He had the liberty to do that. And I think people should. I think people should. I think people should go back to Terry Pratchett. I think if people are really sick and they decide they don't want to live anymore, I want to give them, why don't we do that? What's the problem? People should be freer, not less free. And to get back to what Astro says, that's the difference we're getting here. When you study politics and you study this whole system, and you are taught that the government works for the citizens. But that is exactly why I always said, like, the government is not your mother. It's not the government's job to make you live healthy or make you behave morally, because the government works for you. They're not your parents. They're your employees, basically. We employ them. Literally, we pay them money. I had an argument with an editor-in-chief once, because I said, not once, it was actually, was it this year? I think it was some point this year where they said, I said, they're like, you're too harsh with the politicians. And I'm like, no, I pay their salary. He's like, you don't pay their salary. I'm like, I well do. I study politics, and I quoted them the fucking, it's actually it's actually a constitutional article where it is like, no, really, we pay them, from tax money. That was that argument. But, I did that's what we do. And if the government goes, no, we are the ones who deciding what's good for you, and we can inject you if we want to, then it's starting to be the other way around. It's starting to be me belong to the government. And I don't want that. The government forcing me to have an injection is something that sounds like I'm living in a fascist state. It doesn't sound like I live in a democracy, to be honest. And I don't understand how people can think that. Well, I do understand, because they're afraid. I mean, the whole problem here, this whole thing is that, as I said, you can have laws can be as good as they are. They're interpreted by people, and I'm not even blaming people. They're just afraid. I can't even blame the politicians in this. Really, I was thinking about this the other week as well. I was talking to somebody. I was in a restaurant. We were talking about this kind of thing, and I said I can't even blame the politicians. I said, like, out of reflexes, fucking politicians. And I was like, no, actually, I can't blame them, because I'm blaming the journalists, because the politicians don't know, and they just read the paper. And so if there's bullshit in the paper, how would they know? They don't know. I mean, they have experts, but, generally they pick their sometimes they pick the wrong experts as well. It's like you have an epidemic, and the German government, you have it's still the same fucking experts, still fucking Drosten. They're still asking him, you have an epidemic on your hand. Who do you ask, a virologist or an epidemiologist? They asked the virologist. Yeah, he knows how the fucking spike protein works, but he doesn't know how it spreads. It's not his job. Right? If you have a horse and the horse is sick, who do you ask? Veterinarian or a dentist? Well, okay, the horse could have teeth trouble. A veterinarian or a cardiologist? Horse could have heart. Maybe that's not a good example. But you know what I mean. You have toothache. Who do you ask? A dentist or a cardiologist? I mean, I respect cardiologists, but they're not going to help you with the toothache. Right? It's the wrong guy to ask. It's just simple as that. Wasn't that parachute thing suicide? I don't think we know. There's many theories about this. There's people saying basically it was such a good, and that they should have checked everything. And I don't know, was that ever ruled a suicide? Who was that again? I know he was from the FDP, politician. I'm gonna search for this. Politiker in German. Fallschirm. Wasn't Kinkel, right? No, Jürgen Möllermann. Yes. Oh, it's an English article. Okay, death. Shortly before his death, Möllermann had been confronted with allegations that he had been involved in illegal arms deals and evaded taxes on millions of euros he allegedly earned from those activities. To enable a full investigation on these charges, the Bundestag lifted his parliamentary immunity. On June 5, 22 minutes before his death. Oh, they lifted his parliamentary immunity 22 minutes before his death. Tax evasion charges were dropped after his death. Okay. Well. Möllermann, a passionate and experienced skydiver, died in a parachuting accident at Marlohmühle. His death was investigated by the Essen District Attorney's Office, which published a final report. Oh, it was in Essen. Oh, in Marl he died. Okay. Report on the 9th of July. While outside inference was ruled out, no definite verdict was reached on whether Möllermann committed suicide or had an accident. Okay, so they ruled out murder. So he might have had an accident, but his immunity was lifted 22 minutes before he jumped. So, yes. Sounds likely. But he was also free to do that. I don't know. It's a bit of a pickle. Anyway, if you're interested in more on this, I got some links. They're all German because this is German stuff in the show notes. Aside from the Stoicism link, maybe that'll be interesting. Privatecitizen.press. I hope I haven't depressed you too much for this, but it's like, I must say, to wind it up, I've basically lost a lot of faith in my political system, because I would have expected our constitution to prevent a lot of these things, and it hasn't. And what I understand is that not that all the stuff I learned in university and all the thinking I'd done up to this point are invalidated, because I had thought, I think, too much, and I think this is probably a problem of our university education, where you get taught a lot of if you study politics and history, you get taught a lot about the mechanisms and the systems, right? So how the constitution works, how the courts work, how your elections work, how your parliament works, checks and balances, balance of power, all of this. But I think what they don't teach you enough about is psychology of people, especially society. And what I just realized is that, if the majority of society believes something for whatever reason, then even many of the laws will not, like even very stringent laws will be no obstacle, because it's. And this is weird, because I know this about, like, within the democratic process. I know that, I live in a democracy, and if a lot of people don't agree with me, they can change the laws in a way that I don't like. And I'm completely okay with that. But this is beyond that, because we are not, all of this happened before we had an election, right? So this is not within the democratic process. This is more like the society, like more the zeitgeist. If the zeitgeist is of the opinion that this is so very dangerous and everybody's really afraid of it, then of course everybody will move in that direction. And then if you're like me and you just don't perceive things that way, then you're kind of left behind. And I keep thinking of history class, and I keep thinking of people in situations in history where they're like, I'm not saying it's the same situation, but definitely not. But like I have never understood the mass movement in the Weimar Republic really, and how that worked, and why people didn't rebel against this. And I think it's just like, if that's the zeitgeist and you're just sitting there like me, like an old crotchety guy, not that I'm that old, but you're a crotchety guy, and then you just see things differently. What do? You can't do anything. The only thing you can do is practice Stoicism. You don't. It's happened all over history. Like the same thing in the Roman Republic, right? Same thing. I mean, okay, there was more force involved, but like there's also a lot of people thought it was a good idea to have an empire now. Yeah, I think that's maybe what it means to get wiser or something. I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm just like, it feels like I just understood something about about our reality and about people and about all the systems we lived in that I've never really understood. Which is not a good feeling because I feel somewhat helpless. I feel like I can see things coming that other people don't see coming. And that in the context of this situation, they might think this is a good idea, but they will in 20 years' time, or in 10 years' time, they will suddenly understand how this is bad. And I hope I'm wrong. I really do, because that would mean well, good. So with that, let's move on here, and let's get to the feedback section here. Which I'm going to make short. I just want to give a hint to a forum topic that I found very interesting. So I think we had a good discussion in the forum on the Rittenhouse trial in the US, which I haven't really followed, and that's why it didn't occur on the show, because I know it happened. I was vaguely interested in it, but I just didn't have time. Also NaNoWriMo and things. This didn't happen. But I thought this discussion was very interesting with some very widely disparate viewpoints on it. And in lieu of having done an episode on it, maybe it's a place to go and read up on it. And that's already the feedback section for now. I will only say, please send me feedback on this episode. If you see this completely different, if you think I'm completely wrong and this is a good thing for society, or if you think that we should fight it, and we can, and here's how, please, I would love to hear that. And if you're in another country and you see, well, look, for example, the US Constitution is holding up a lot better in this situation because, or maybe the French Constitution, because here it's going this way, or maybe this is another solution to fight it, then that is, please let me know. Please, privatecitizen.press, let me know. Go there, write me an email, go on the forums, whatever. But please get in contact, because I'm talking into a void here sometimes. And I'd like to get some other viewpoints on here, and that would be helpful. So you do me a big favor, and you're a producer of the show very much if you do that. That's why it's called producer feedback. So please, if you can contribute anything, think about it. And with that, this is the other kind of producer I have to thank. Toss a coin to your podcaster. I have people who support me monetarily to do this, which is very important to me because I kind of need to live. And as a freelancer, I am not living the life of Riley. Let me tell you that. So if you become a patron, I would be very indebted to you. On Patreon, there's a button in the show notes. It's not really a button, it's more a picture that you click on. privatecitizen.press, i.e. it doesn't track you. And you can go there and you can also see how much money I'm actually getting a month for this. And for this, I have committed to doing an episode a week, and I've done well so far. So far, we are on schedule. Our 98th episode is quite a thing. There have only been a few podcasts. Well, I think 2 podcasts that's ever done that's gotten this far. And I don't even know if Geek News already got that far. Can't remember right offhand. Linux Outlaws certainly has, but I've never been able to do a podcast I do on my own, where I talk for about an hour and a half or whatever, or however long this is gonna be, every week, and do this on my own. So it's a significant amount of work. So I thank everybody who's helping me out. If you don't want to commit to a monthly amount, whatever that would be, you can also go to PayPal, and you can just send some money to producers@fab.industries. And you'd get credited, of course, as well as the Patreon people, because that's part of it. And also, if you're a Twitch subscriber, get to that in a bit. That's the value for value model, which means basically you get it for free, pay what you want. But the idea is that you value, right? It's kind of like Stoicism. Put your money where your mouth is. Your virtue is in how you react to the world, and you can't change that I'm producing podcasts. That is out of your control. Well, I'm just looking out the window because you could come over here and shoot me in the head. It would be nice if you did not do that. I'm just realizing, I mean, there are a lot of people who are trying to get the Drachenlord to stop making YouTube videos, but they haven't succeeded yet either. So, right. But you can act on that with virtue, but you don't have to. Whatever you. And I'm really not trying to guilt you into anything. I really don't. I believe that people should, pay for these things if they want to, and if they don't want to, it's also okay. I'm stoic about this kind of thing. But I would like to thank the people who have brought this show to you by supporting it monetarily. Those people are the heroes of this episode: are Georges, Steve Hose, Butterbeans, Jonathan M. Heathy, Michael Mullen Jensen, Dave, Michael Small, One Eye 11G, Jaroslav Lichtblau, Jackie Plage, Philip Klostermann, IKN, Vlad, Rodane the Insane, Bennett Piata, Kai Sears, Tobias, Fadi Mansour, Joe Poser, Dirk Didi, Mode 7, Sandman616, David Potter, Rizal, Mika, Avis, Martin, Mr. Ramish, Dave Umrish, Cam, Ricky M, Barry Williams, Jonathan, Captain Egghead, RJ Tracy, Rick Bragg, D, Robert Forster, Superuser, Astro C, and No Reply. And while I read that out, I just noticed Captain Egghead, who has been very vehemently disagreeing with me sometimes on the forum, which I think is great. I find it amazing that I have listeners that can agree with me and still support me in doing this. That's pretty cool. And a lot of these people have been with the show for a long time, and I appreciate that a lot. And we have some of them who are also supporting me because they subscribe to my Twitch channel. As I said in the beginning here, I'm streaming this live on Twitch. And of course, if you subscribe to the channel, where I do a lot of other things, I do I play games. I wrote live during NaNoWriMo. I did a few streams where I wrote my novel on stream. I'm just looking around. Somewhere here is a box full of bricks. They're kind of like Lego bricks, but they're not. And I will build, it's like a little medieval watermill. I will build that on stream at some point. I just need to get the time to do that. So so if you can also support that. But the people who are my Twitch subscribers who are doing that, some of them, of course, with Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime, you can do this for free. You have to renew it every month, but it's basically no cost to you because you already have Prime and it supports me. And so those people I thank them very much as well. Mike the Dane, Johnson MH_Cobb, Mode 7 is unavailable, IndieGameX, El Terrestris Jim, Redeemer F, Sandman616, Galtaran, Halifa, Violet Hummingbird, Bacon the Pork, and Stardew Lisa. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for doing this. And some of them are in chat right now giving me live feedback, which is cool. And they're telling me that the technology on my end is broken and that I need to fix it. And I hopefully fix stuff live because we had some audio issues that you won't notice if you listen to this in the podcast. You're you're the prime audience. You get everything. It's right recorded on my desktop. If something fails, it'll be on the Twitch and going to Twitch, but not on the podcast recording. I make sure that it's that way. It's kind of like this is a podcast after all. I'm just live streaming it because some people seem to enjoy it, and I kind of like live streaming. It's kind of fun. Anyway, I'd like to thank Bytemark as well. Bytemark.co.uk. UK cloud hoster. They host the audio files that you get if you listen to this podcast for free for me, and I appreciate that a lot. So thanks to Bytemark. Yeah, and that is pretty much it. The theme tune for this song. Yeah, right. The theme tune for the song for the podcast is called Acoustic Roots by Raoul Kabazali, and I'm gonna play us out now with some music that I think kind of fits my my general demeanor during this episode, which is called A Sky Sparkling by Johannes Bernloff. And until then, confront the world with virtue, and if that doesn't work, aim to misbehave. Yeah, thanks for that, Jim. I had the wrong audio interface selected in OBS. That was due to the NaNoWriMo streams. And with that, I'm gonna leave you now. I'm gonna have to finish this episode, and it's already too late. I'm gonna have to pretend I'm in the US again with the time zone. So it's out on the right there. Just please don't pay attention to that. And we're gonna rate Ben Burns now, who's doing his 2-hour track rounds, and he's in the middle of making a song. So that's gonna be cool. And then I'm gonna quickly say hello to him, and then I'm gonna fuck off. Finish this podcast, upload it, do everything, do the audio, do the video thing, and then I'm gonna write a little bit because I got some fucking deadlines, and then I'm just gonna collapse into bed at like 4 o'clock in the morning or something. So I appreciate you coming along and watching this, even though it was maybe a bit depressing. Good night, Jim. Thanks for being here. No worries. That's what I do because I like doing it. Yeah. So thanks for hanging out. It was really cool. Next time a little bit more upbeat, I'm guessing. Anyway, see you soon, guys. Thank you very much.